Welcome to the CloudSec Network. In today's video, we are going to be discussing an essential part of AWS security, which is Identity and Access Management, otherwise called IAM. Specifically, we'll be going through the AWS IAM Identity Center, which was previously called the Single Sign-On Service. We'll also go through permission sets and how this differs from the traditional IAM users, roles, and also policies. My name is Manuel Okun, and I'm a certified AWS Solutions Architect professional with vast years of experience consulting for several organizations across several industries. AWS Identity and Access Management is the backbone of security on the AWS cloud. Two of the most important benefits of the AWS IAM Identity Center is streamlined administration and multi-account management. Now, I will attempt to break down what are IAM users and roles in the traditional IAM setting. With traditional IAM, you create individual users who get access via policies attached to them. These users are specific to each AWS account. So in a situation where you have 50 AWS accounts and a developer needs access to 40 of them, you would create a separate IAM user in every single account. An IAM role is like a temporary ID badge that allows the users or services to get access to specific AWS resources for a limited time. Roles are typically used to grant access to resources without sharing any credentials. Let's take an example. Imagine you're visiting a restricted area in a building. Instead of getting a permanent ID card, in this case an IAM user, you are given a visitor pass, the IAM rule, that lets you access specific rooms for a limited time. Once you are done, you return the pass and the access is revoked. Moving on to a more modern approach, with the IAM Identity Center, we have what is known as permission sets. A permission set is simply a list of permissions that you can easily apply to users or groups. If a company has three AWS accounts, one for production, another for staging, and a third one for development, with IAM Identity Center, a user account would only need to be created once, and with the help of permission sets, applied to all other AWS accounts in the company. To make it even more fascinating, you can integrate with external directories such as the Azure Active Directory, which is now called Intra ID. You can also integrate with Okta, JumpCloud, and many others. Let's get started with the demo. We're going to be going through how to create an identity center. However, before we get started on that, let us go through a service called AWS Organizations. So for the AWS organizations, it's simply a way for you to create multiple AWS accounts within your environment. Over here, you would see that we do have three accounts, a management account and two other accounts. So ideally, you would want to have an account for production separate, another account for staging and development separate. I've actually even seen organizations that have up to 26 AWS accounts. Some even have more, right? So all these accounts will be tied together in a simplified manner, and it's really good for management purposes. Then if you go and search for IAM, you would see two services show up. You would see the IAM service, which I would refer to as traditional IAM, and then you would see the IAM Identity Center. So for the IAM service, you would see top features, groups, users, roles, policies. I explained already what those are. So we wouldn't be doing that in this demonstration. Instead, we'll be creating Identity Center. So for Identity Center, you need to be cautious about the region where you are deploying your Identity Center in. Right now, I'm in North Virginia, right? You would also want to think about data compliance or data privacy implications, think about latency or proximity to your users when choosing your AWS region. Um, as well, I'm using the root account for this. So we'll use the root account for the initial setup, and then afterwards, we will then use the created users to manage our AWS resources, not the root account. I'll go ahead to enable IAM Identity Center. Once I click on enable, that should be it. It should, by default, create a lot of configurations for me. So I can see my success message. I will go ahead and make just one change and then proceed to user creation. Before that, you can see where it says confirm your identity source. So if you click on confirm your identity source, the identity center directory is what comes by default. So you can manually add users, remove users, add users to group, all of that. The provisioning method for all that is direct. So you can change this. You guys can also let me know if you want to see how to integrate external directories like maybe Entra ID, Okta, Jump Cloud, and the rest. So this looks good. I'll leave it at the default and then go back to the dashboard. So in the dashboard, I would want to be able to change my um, access portal URL. So I can start by editing my instance name to something unique. So I can call it, yes, let me see, I'll call it Sparkline NG. So use something unique and then click Save Changes. Once you've done that, you see that it gets updated. We can as well go to the access portal URL. This access portal URL is more or less like the login URL where people will be able to access AWS from now that Identity Center has been provisioned. So I would want to give them something that will be easy for them to remember. I will still use the same name. So it's something that everybody should be able to relate to. Use any name of your choice too as well. So I'll choose this and then click on save. Upon doing that, it should give me a custom URL. So I can see success message that access portal URL successfully updated, name of instance successfully changed. So that's all we'll do right now for configuring the identity center. We can dive right into creating users, but before we create users, it's best practice to always have users assigned to groups. So let's say you have a group of network administrator, or a group of DevOps engineers, or a group of developers. You would want to have that group existing in your identity center so that if new people join the development group or join the administration or systems administration group, you can equally add them to that group instead of having all those users separated. And I'll show you why that is useful. So let's see, we have developers. I'll leave description as blank and then create. So I've created a group called developers. I'll then go ahead and provision a user on the platform. So I'll go ahead and click on add user. So for add user, you can give it a username. Let me take this away. You can give this a username. I will say this, and then I think you can as well choose how you would want the users to receive their password. So you can go with sending them an email or generating a one-time password. I think it's most secure to send them an email, so I'll go with that approach. I'll select that email over here, select confirm their email, and good enough, putting their first name, the last name, and then this will be their display name. So you can change any of these parameters depending on the user that you're adding. I'll leave other fields as blank and proceed to next. So once I do that, I then see the developers group that I initially created. I want to add this user to that group, so it's fine. So now the good part is, because I have groups, I can assign permissions to groups and not to users. So by the time a new user is joining an organization, you will just add that user to the group, and all the permissions in that group automatically will be assumed by that new user. So I would add the user to that group, confirm the details, and then click on add. So once the user has been added, I will still need to define the permissions for that user. So defining the permissions for that user is done through the use of permission sets. So I'll need to create a permission set for that user. Being that the user belongs to the developer group, so most likely the user might just need only read-only access. And because of that, I will just create a permission set for read-only access. So we can see some predefined permission sets. You can go for something custom. However, what I need can be handled by a predefined permission set. So I definitely don't want that user to have administrator access or database administrator or to become a network administrator. No, I simply just want that user to have read-only access. So I'll select read-only access. Once you select read only access, you then go ahead to click on next, and then you can see the permission set name has been pre-filled as read only access. I'll leave it like that. And then section duration, you can say 1 hour, 2 hours, 12 hours, whichever is fine for your security and business requirements. However, I like to stay extremely secure, so I'll just keep it at 1 hour. Then we click on next. Once you click on next, you review the details. If the details are fine, then you create. Now, because you've created a permission set, does not automatically mean that your users have access to that permission. No, it doesn't. You need to do an assignment. And how you do an assignment is by going to your left under multi-account permissions, you would see AWS account. So you click on that. So we need to add um, permissions, this read-only access permission, we need to tie it to a user, but not in this case, actually a group. And that user belongs to that group and would assume those privileges. So I would say the developer should have access to just sandbox. As I discussed, least privilege. So I'll give the user access to sandbox and then click on assign users or groups. Once I click on that, it will show me two interfaces. You can as well assign directly to a user, but in our case, we're assigning to a group. I'll click on that and then click on the group. I will then go ahead and click next. So I'll review the details. We have only one permission set in our account, which is read only access. So I'll select that permission set. If there are multiple of them, you can as well select multiple permission sets. I'll go ahead and also click next, review the details for this configuration I'm currently doing. If it looks okay, I'll then submit. So it should take like a few seconds to just configure these permissions in the AWS account. And right now it's showing me that it's successful. So that means that user should now have permission to the sandbox account. Let's actually confirm that now. So if we go back to users, once we go back to users, we would see, we'll try to see details about the user. So click on the user to see details, like the accounts the user belongs to, services the user has access to, and even groups that the user um, is under. So we can as well see profile information, which is fine. If I click on groups, I will see is currently there's a group membership for developers, which is correct. I'll go to AWS accounts and I would see Sandbox, which is correct. Just Sandbox because we only gave him access to Sandbox and not the management account, not production, just Sandbox. You can as well use the Identity Center to give access to applications, not even just AWS accounts, but also applications. Right now, the user has not activated his profile, so he hasn't configured any MFA yet. However, once the user configures MFA with his phone, you would see that MFA device would also show up. So what the user needs to simply do is to follow. I'll click on this to send an email verification link. What the user simply needs to do is to follow the details in that email to set up his account, and it's a seamless experience. I'll go back to the dashboard. So now we've been able to configure the identity source. As you can see, it's a straightforward process and it's effective for building robust security around your user access management in the AWS cloud.